Hi, and welcome to this week's Wu Wei Wisdom Life Lessons teaching. It's great to be back with you all. This week, we are talking all about why so many people believe they are not good enough. So if you feel like a failure or inadequate in yourself, in your life, or your achievements, this teaching is absolutely going to be for you. We'll be digging deep to find the origin of this self-doubt and the negative, painful mindset it creates, so you can finally break free of this self-harming story once and for all. Okay, David. So I know you work with lots of clients on this issue of self-doubt and believing that we are somehow not good enough. Where does this come from? What's the origin of this belief?
Well, it's such a simple statement, but it's so complicated. And so fasten down your seatbelt and let's see if we can delve into it. Because if you've ever thought in your self-talk, use that phrase, I'm not good enough, then this is for you. Because the complications are widespread and it affects your life in so many ways. But you're right, Alex. I would say we call it a trilogy of 3 lies. I'm not good enough. I can't cope. I'm unlovable and I'm unworthy. I would think I'm not good enough is the one that I hear every day. Now, it's the one that you normally come across for those of you who are trying to do our technique of the golden thread. You know, when you start from an emotional feeling, you say, I am creating this feeling. Why am I creating this feeling? And after you've gone down about 3 layers, you normally come to, I'm not good enough. Mm-hmm. And that's where they stop there.
So a client will come to you with painful, uncomfortable emotions.
Anxiety, stress, depression, being fearful, scared, being overwhelmed. Yeah. Yes.
Their thought process is when you dig deep using the golden thread process therapy model that you work through, you get to the thoughts, which is, this is all going to be a problem. They're going to hate me. I'm not going to be able to manage this situation. And then when you continue to dig deeper using that process, what you're saying is you typically will get down to the belief system, the lie within the client's belief system. I am not good enough.
Yes.
This is because I'm not good enough.
That's right. And they present that as a kind of as a fact. There you go. I'm not good enough. And as I've said to you many times in these videos, I've heard this for 45 years. Not one person has ever given me the evidence that they're not good enough. Well, what they do, and what you might be doing now as you hear me say that, say, well, I'll prove it. No, you don't prove you're not good enough. You give me the result of believing you're not good enough. Mm-hmm. Because I say, well, look, I didn't get the job I want. I didn't get the qualification I want. My partner left me. I'm in a terrible job. I'm in this. But that's the result. That's the outcome of believing you're not good enough. When I say to my clients, that's not evidence of why you're not good enough. You have to come to the understanding, the incident, the thought, whatever it is, that you came to that conclusion that I am not good enough, unless you believe that you were born not good enough. Now, I've never met a client who says, yes, of course, I was born not good enough. So if you do not believe you were born not good enough, then where did you come to that conclusion? And even, as I say to my clients, even if as your birth, the midwife or your parents held you up and said, look at this child, it's just not good enough. Does that make it true? Does that make it real? Does that make it honest? Does that have integrity? Do you then build your life on what other people say? And this is the question. From the year 0, when you were born, to when you adopted this belief system, I'm not good enough, where did that develop?
So, David, I can I get the point you're making about as adults, typically, if we think we're useless, we're inadequate, we're a failure, we support that kind of internal statement to ourselves or other people with a catalogue of evidence, which you're saying that evidence is actually not the original reason. That's the result of thinking. So if you believe you're a failure, if you believe you're no good at relationships, if you believe you're inadequate at your job, if you believe you're doomed to make a mess of things on everything, you're more likely for those things to happen.
Well, so let me just check that though, Alex, because that's very important what you just said. I call it self-fulfilling prophecies, and you call it confirmation biased, but it's also cherry picking.
Okay.
Because you only focus on the negative. Yeah. You don't focus on all the great things that you've done. You disregard those in a flash of an eye.
Yeah.
You don't think about all the wonderful things that you've achieved. You focus on the bad things and you line them up, and that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. It supports this lie that I'm not good enough.
Well, I think there is the confirmation bias thing, the proactively and bias, searching in a very biased way, looking for negative outcomes to prove our own point that we're not good enough. I think that definitely happens. But I also think the self-fulfilling prophecy also happens alongside that, which is, that's kind of the law of attraction stuff,
I believe that's the law of attraction.
And those two, so I think those two negative things that we are invoking and working with, they deepen, they entrench our mindset in this I'm rubbish, this self-doubt mindset. But the point you were making is, put all that to one side. That's still not the original reason why. But you said in childhood, David.
Yes, and just before we go to childhood, there's one more thing, because what we're talking about here is very important to kind of clear the confusion. Because, as you said, it creates the law of attraction. Mm-hmm. Because here's the point. If you have a belief somewhere in your mind that you're not good enough, you cannot flourish. Can you? Because you'd be calling yourself a liar. You cannot be successful. You can't, because you've set up your law of attraction that I'm not good enough. So if you do something that allows you to flourish, that allows you to be in your flow, that allows you to be the best that you can be, you're kind of paradoxically arguing against yourself. So you have this internal battle. On one hand, and this is why when I talk about connecting to Shen, to your spirituality, I give you three main qualities. Truth, be truthful to yourself and others. Honest, be honest in what we're talking about now. Be honest to yourself when you listen to these words. Is this you? You don't have to tell anybody else, but be honest to yourself. And then above all, integrity. And many of my clients say, well, what does integrity mean? How does that demonstrate? How do you show that in every life, David? And I say, well, it's walking the walk and talking the talk. So many people can talk the talk. So many people can tell other people what they should or shouldn't be doing, what's right and wrong, but they don't walk that walk themselves. And you know what the opposite to integrity is, I believe? Hypocrisy. Hypocrisy. You hypocritically say one thing, but you do the opposite. How can you try and be the best that you can be, to be a great example to your children, to reach your true potential, whilst believing you're not good enough? It's hypocritical. It doesn't make sense. And that's why I just wanted to really focus on that point.
And that's a kind of very stark and painful point that we need to acknowledge, because you're so right. We can have all these aspirations, we can have all these intentions, we can have all these life goals. We can make positive outward statements and actions in terms of moving forward with our life, our career, our money, our relationships, our health. But if deep down we hold a belief that we are not good enough, we're going to fail, we're going to be inadequate at this, we are powerfully and profoundly handicapping ourselves in our abilities, as you say, to flourish and grow. And that is, it's such a crying shame, because we have so much potential within us that we knowingly, well, we should know now because we brought it out into the open, that we knowingly are still doing this to ourselves. We're supposed to be the person that looks after ourselves the most, and yet we are self-harming ourselves by holding on to this powerful belief that we're not good enough.
And that's why I like to call it a lie. And most people find that very abrupt. And I want it to be abrupt, because you're lying to yourself, a barefaced lie. And you don't want to be a liar, do you? Is that how you want to portray yourself? Is that how you want to have that integrity with yourself? And that's why I think to clear this up is about clear thinking and clear speaking to yourself. Don't worry about anyone else. You can listen to this. It doesn't matter what you say to other people. It's what you say after this video to yourself. Is it truthful? Has it honesty? And above all, has it integrity? Do you put yourself down as a person who has integrity, who can walk the walk and talk the talk? And that, to me, is why this is a spiritual teaching. Because when you haven't got that internal integrity, how can you have that spirituality that we've talked about in all of our videos? How can you look in the mirror and not look through a mask? How can you, as Alex says, work out all these affirmations? Today I'm going to be so wonderful, and yet believe you're not good enough. They're incompatible. They're opposites. They're the pendulum we talk about. One side believes, yes, today I'm going to really be successful. Say, going to this interview. Today I'm going to sit in front of this interview and I'm going to be amazing. But inside, the little voice saying, yeah, but you're not good enough, and they'll find you out, and you'll look weak, and they'll challenge you, and you'll fall down. And there's the problem. You're swinging from one side to the other, and not in your flow and not in Wu Wei.
And you know what, David? I think we go through these life situations, such as interviews, entering into new relationships, big kind of lifestyle changes, through health changes or health crises, and we come through them. And we often have positive results, but we come through them with the belief, that self-doubt. And I guess what we realize is we become lazy because we think, okay, well, I still didn't think I was going to make it. I still didn't think I'm good enough. A lot of us still have this imposter syndrome. I don't actually deserve this. I don't deserve this job. I don't deserve this partner. And we still keep the belief in place because we still come through. We never hit a mega crisis. But what we're not appreciating is that if we didn't have the belief, we would have achieved so much more. We would have flourished so much more. We would have grown. We would have developed. We would have opened ourselves up to a humongous amount of possibilities. And yet we've actually throttled ourselves in some way. Although we've come through by the skin of our teeth, we may have successes in our life. Things have turned out all right, despite our kind of expectations that they weren't going to. Nobody sits down and tells us, yes, but if you'd have lost that, if you didn't hold on to this self-doubt, my goodness, the world would have really, the abundance of everything would be open to you.
Well, that's a really interesting point, Alex, because what we're doing actually is making any success that we achieve doubly, trebly, quadruply harder.
Yeah.
It's like everybody else is walking freely and you're dragging an anchor along with you. And you'd be amazed that you call it the imposter syndrome. You'd be amazed at the amount of clients who say to me, deep down, when we do the golden thread and we talk on this deeper level, deep down, I'm a fraud. I'm a fraud. I don't know how I keep the job. I don't know why my boss likes me. I'm doubting everything I do. So everything you do is twice, 3 times, 4 times, 10 times as hard as everyone else, because you're going through this story, this maze, this ridiculousness, this lie. I don't know what else to call it. It doesn't even make sense. The statement, I am not good enough. It doesn't even make sense. Who's saying that? You? Well, you can't be saying it because you've already said you're not good enough. Not good enough for whom? Who's making the judgment? What is the criteria they're judging you by? Can you see what happens now? You're running around. So even if you were good enough, if there was 10 people in your surroundings, what happened if 5 thought you were good enough and 5 thought you were not good enough? I tell you which ones you'd aimed for is the 5 who thought you wasn't good enough.
Because we would think the people who think we are good enough they've bought into the illusion of who we are. But actually the 5 people who really, really know us and have judged us not good enough, they know the truth about us. Our ego, our inner child, our mind will always be drawn towards to prove this deep-seated belief we have.
Which is a complete fallacy. It's a complete lie. I would call it BS. It's absolutely BS. It doesn't make sense. And even more, it doesn't make sense. It does not make sense. And yet, you're pivoting your life on this false lie, a complete lie. Stop it. You have to stop it because it won't heal itself. A magic fairy of wishful thinking doesn't fly in and rearrange your mind to stop this nonsense. You have to be accountable. And you have to take responsibility.
I can see how we could spend time dismantling all the outcomes or what, I may have originally called evidence to prove I'm not good enough, or the client will come to you, failure at this, failure at that, not being as good as them, not achieving this, blah, 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 blah. And I could see that we could dismantle all that, and actually there would be, we talk about things like you're aiming for perfection when perfection doesn't exist, and we go all around the houses. But what we would still need to do, because although I could turn to you and say, yes, David, I can logically see you are right. I can see where you're going to. This is just outcomes, not evidence that I'm inadequate, not good enough. But there is still something stubborn within me that is just totally sold lock, stock and barrel on a fundamental inadequacy within me. What is going on here, and how on earth am I going to find that and unlock that?
Okay. So this is what we would call the inner child. Now, you may want to call it your ego, your subconscious mind, your emotional mind, but stick with me for a moment on this idea of the inner child. And if you want to know more about it, we've literally done tons of videos in our archives. Please go and check it out. I don't mean something separate from you. I'm just giving a label for a part of your mind. So when you've done the golden thread, starting from an emotion, asking why you created the emotion, why, and then you come down to this lie, I'm not good enough. And then the technique is to then do the golden thread again. Why do you believe you're not good enough? Now, here's where it takes a bit of consistency. As Alex just said, don't go to the outcome of believing you're not good enough. Go to why you created that belief from birth to when you created it. Now, normally, typically, for my clients, not every client, but for my clients, it will happen in their childhood. Now, it could be directly that someone has said it to them. Very rarely, to be honest, from all of my clients, very rare a parent or a guardian will say, you are just not good enough. But it happens, so it could happen to you. But it's normally inferred. It's normally by the way your parents, your guardians treat you, the way they look at you, the way they're never happy, the way it doesn't matter if you got 80% out of something you work really hard on. They would look at it and say, well, why didn't you get the other 20%? Or they might compare you with your sibling, or they might compare you with people at school, or they might compare you with somebody else's in the family. Well, look how good they're doing. Look at them. Look at them. And so then when that situation occurs, when you are a child and you are unable to cognitively listen to this type of teaching and analyze it for yourself, when you're in that environment as a child, this happens to you. When you're looking for praise, when you're looking for someone to give you a hug and to say, wow, you're amazing. Wow, 80%, that's fantastic. I could see how hard you worked. We're so proud of you. They don't say that. They say the opposite. Then it's totally understandable that that child then goes to what I call the vow, VOW. They say a statement to themselves right at the core. And this statement normally sounds like, well, it must be me. There must be something wrong with me. I've worked really hard and my parents still aren't happy. My teachers still aren't satisfied. I still can't get into the football team. I still can't play netball. I'm not in the in crowd. This is the thing I hear a lot. I'm not in the in crowd. I'm not with the in children. I'm an outsider. They don't accept me. So it must be me, mustn't it? That means I'm not good enough. Bang. And there's the first domino. Once you say that to yourself, then that part of your mind constructs what I call the story. Now it cherry picks. Now it forgets all of the good stuff. Now it just looks at the confirmation bias to prove its story. And over the years, very subtly, very cleverly, then every time somebody turns their back on you, or you don't get a date, or you don't meet an exam, or you don't get a job, there you go. There's another tick in the box. There's another tick in the box. There's another tick in the box. And so this story becomes more and more concrete until, and here's the point, it forms your identity. It's who you identify yourself with. And that's when I use that example. 10 people, 5 of them think you're awesome. As Alex said, you discount those and you go to the 5 that aren't that happy because that matches with your self-identity, the way you view yourself.
But of course, the most powerful point to make on that, I guess, is that it forms your identity, but it's not actually who you are.
Exactly.
So
it's not the truth.
It's not the truth about who you are. It's your your identity. Yes, my goodness, it can seem incredibly real. And we bring it to life even more, as you say, by searching around for all the evidence to prove it, to elaborate it, to make it brighter, to bring it into sharper relief of all the hundreds of ways we're not good enough. And yet, it's all an illusion.
Exactly.
It's an illusion because how can we possibly be inadequate if we are divine beings?
Exactly. And that's why I believe the Wu Wei Wisdom model is slightly different to others, because at its core, it's this idea of spirituality that we call Shen. Now, I'm not talking about something that's invisible, supernatural. I'm not talking about spirituality like crystals or angels or religion. None of that. I'm talking about your spirit, your non-material self. And if you go, oh, yeah, I don't want to go here, but think about it. As I often say, think about somebody you really love, normally a child. Think about your child, your physical child. And if I asked you to describe that child, you quite easily tell me the way they look, the color of their hair, the eyes, the way they dress, what you love about them, what drives you mad about them. But if I asked you, is that all they are, the physical? You go, no, of course not. And that's what I mean by Shen. That non-material part. And everybody's got that. Hopefully in these videos, you get an idea of our Shen. Now, you might disagree with what we're saying. You might not like what we're wearing. You might not like things about us. But you will get our Shen, that we're doing this because we're passionate about it. We believe in this. And we want you to at least consider it with integrity. And that's why we come up with these, hopefully, to simplify the models, such as this: I'm not good enough. Let me prove it's a lie to you. You already know it, but let me prove it. If you have a physical child and they came home with you and they said, the example that I used, they said, Mom, Dad, I work really hard. You saw me working hard. You saw me at night in my room studying. And I'll make it even worse, I only got 60%. Would you look at them in the eye and say, well, that's because you're not good enough? Of course you wouldn't. No one would. It's cruel. And what's more, it's untrue. It's a lie. It's abuse. Now, if you wouldn't say to your physical child, why on earth is it okay to say to you, hypocrisy? That is downright hypocrisy. And that's what you've got to stop. And you've got to say what you would say to your child, your physical child, you've got to say to your inner child, to your spiritual child, because that little part of you needs the encouragement, needs to be told the truth, needs their hand held, needs to walk through it, because that's what they've always missed. That's what they were looking for from their parents and their guardians and their superiors. They never had it, but they can get it from you, the mature you. And I would want you to be the spiritual parent to your spiritual child.
So every time we say in some way, shape or form to ourselves, I'm not good enough, I'm inadequate, I'm a failure, what you're saying is that is the voice of our inner child talking to us. It's the legacy of when we were a child and we were either told directly in some way that we weren't good enough, or as you say, more often than not, we drew a conclusion, a false conclusion, that we weren't good enough because of how people treated us. When we say that to ourselves now as adults, that's our inner child talking. And our inner child does not believe or understand or grasp the concept of us as a divine being, because our inner child really just wants to be loved by our parents, its parents still. It really just wants to be validated in the way that it desperately wanted to be validated as a child. It's kind of lost and by itself, and we are not, when we agree with the inner child, or when we don't question it, or when we don't say, darling, you're wrong here, you are divine, you are unique, etc., etc. When we just run with the inner child's narrative, this is where we are letting ourselves down, essentially. We're not playing our part in terms of managing and nurturing ourselves.
Yes, we're not loving ourselves, Alex.
Yeah.
we are not caring for ourselves. We're not nurturing ourselves. We're not being spiritually true to ourselves. And as Alex has just explained, all children, this is typical, this is nothing wrong. All children, we are taught, I was taught, Alex was taught, you are taught, to look outside of ourselves for value and worth. That's what the term validation means. It means I want somebody else to kind of stamp some value on me. This is a complete nonsense. Again, we've done several videos on this. Well worth you looking at it. If you're constantly looking to people please, if you're looking outside of yourself for strokes, for somebody to tell you how good you are, to get their worth, to get their validation, you are part of this. This is a nonsense. Somebody cannot give you, as Alex says, what you already have. You are already divine. You are already worthy. You already have value. How can someone give you, do they give you a cup of value and say, oh, you're missing some value. Here's some validation. There you are. You'll be all right now. Now, as an adult, you're probably laughing and scoffing at me and saying, well, I don't believe that. But does your inner child believe that? That's the question for you. And really, that's the question that only you can answer. And the way to deal with your inner child, truth, honesty, and integrity. Don't ignore it. When it comes to you and creates a red light, whether you want to call it fear, anxiety, whatever you want to call it, overwhelm, I call it a red light feeling. This is your inner child screaming out at you for attention, for guidance, for teaching. And when it answers you and says, well, I'm not good enough, or I can't cope, or I have no value or worth, it'd be like your physical child coming to you. What would you say if your physical child came home from school and just said, Mom, Dad, I've come to this great conclusion. I'm just not good enough. You wouldn't say, oh, yeah, well, probably right, son, you carry on. You wouldn't just let him carry on or let the child carry on. You'd draw them in, you'd talk them through, you'd give them the education. And really, I'm saying don't look for other people to do that. That's your responsibility to do that for yourself. And then you'll stop this nonsense. You'll stop these lives. And the beauty about this is when you stop lying to yourself, your life changes. Because your direction changes, as Alex says, the law of attraction. Now, instead of looking to fulfill, I'm not good enough, you start looking for the truth. The truth in situations, yes, some situations are very bad. But you know what? Every bad situation that you've come through, that you've experienced in your life, you have come through it. You've already been successful. All we're talking about is you do it with a greater flow, with Wu Wei. In your flow, you reach your potential, you flourish, you do it with ease, with all your energy focused onto your path.
I like the idea of evening out the gathering of evidence. So rather than putting 100% focus into gathering evidence to prove we're not good enough in all many aspects of our life, to start from a neutral position and start to make note. I guess we have to do this quite proactively and consciously early doors because we're not used to doing it, to make note of where we have been successful, where things have gone the right way, where people have responded well to us, where we have raised our game, all those small wins and successes and positive results that we overlook every day. If we can start consciously cataloguing them in some way, I think that almost may start to retrain our brain into certainly away from the negative thinking, the negative evidence gathering habit that we've got into.
But this has to start with the belief because of what you said earlier, because the successes actually are not as powerful as the misses. So you have to start with deconstructing the belief that I'm not good enough. Once you deconstruct that, once you do not allow that lie, then the wins, the things you've done successfully in your life, will have equally importance. Because this is not saying that you will never have failures. This is not saying you will never be made redundant, get the sack, relationships break up, things like that, because that is what happens in reality. That happens to all of us. But what we're saying is when you're in your flow, then you deal with that authentically, spiritually. With integrity, you walk the walk and you talk the talk. You're not looking for scoring points on just focusing on the negative. So the beginning of this has to start with the belief system. And the belief system has to be based in truth, honesty, and integrity.
So to deconstruct, we go back through often doing some inner child work, and we can put links to our teachings on the inner child work. And obviously you can work one-to-one with David doing the inner child work. We get back to the original point in time, the incident or incidences when we first told ourselves, I'm not good enough, or we were first told we weren't good enough.
And you challenge that.
And you challenge it. Because all this time, we, as a child, we quite rightly put a lot of value on what our parents or carers were saying to us. But now we can reflect back and see, well, they were emotionally imbalanced. They're human beings as well. They're not perfect. And we also need, I guess, do we need to help our inner child deconstruct the concept of perfection?
Yes, we will need, and we've done, again, many videos on perfection. So the inner child will always come up with this kind of solution. As Alex said, well, if I was perfect, if I did everything right, if I was top of the class, if I was the most beautiful, if I was the most handsome, if I was the tallest, if I was the best looking, the best dressed, if I was in the best groups, if I was part of the gang, if I always passed my exams, then everybody would appreciate me and I would be good enough. And you see, it's a very childlike logic. And that's what you have to deal with. When you're doing what I would call a meditation, an inner discussion with the inner child, that's what I do with my clients. We try and get through to the inner child and we try and talk to that part of their mind. I often say it's a little bit like you're channeling that part of the mind. I say to my clients, try and relax, take a breath, let me ask you a question, and then answer it. The first thing that comes into your head, you can always retract it or change it, but just see if we can talk to that part of the mind. And some clients find it difficult, but some clients, if they can get into it very, very easy, they'll close their eyes and they'll just answer the questions. And you'll normally come to a scenario was, well, I'm not good enough because I could never please my father. I could never please my mother because my father would never congratulate me because I could never get his approval. And it would be something like that. And then that allows you to sit and to say, does that really, is your father or your mother or your teacher, or are they the person that distributes value? Are they godlike? And so what you're doing is you're talking to the child, and instead of viewing it through that 6, 7, 8-year-old mindset, where to a 6-year-old, their father, their mother is God, and you widen that view out. And I often say to my clients, so ask yourself this is you. Did you do and believe everything your parents said? Really? You did everything your parents said? Not many children do. And this is why this pleasing parents have got such a power for a child. And that's what you have to deconstruct. You deconstruct that the way we've demonstrated. You do the golden thread. If you're unsure how to do it, you can join our Facebook community free and people will guide you through it. We do lots of videos on it, and it's just about sitting quietly, shoulders dropped, deep breath, being truthful, being honest, questioning what you believe and why you believe it, and then taking responsibility or being accountable, if you prefer that, for what you believe and why you believe it. And then your life pivots. It's like reprogramming a sat nav. Instead of going down that road, you start to go down another road. And this is why it's so powerful and life-changing.
Brilliant. Thank you, David. Well, I hope you have got some real insight on this video in terms of any of your issues of inadequacy or believing you're not good enough. We have done so many other teachings on self-doubt and self-criticism, as well as lots of teachings on reparenting techniques. And as David says, you're very welcome to join our free Facebook community. We also run online workshops, and David does his one-to-ones as well to help you with these issues. And I will put links to all those things in the show notes. If you have enjoyed the teaching, please do let us know and maybe share it with someone else who you think would benefit. David works every week by Zoom call with clients all over the world on these issues. And finally, please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We produce new teachings every week, and we would love to share your journey with you. Bye-bye.